Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the Diversity Saves Community Showcase. If you're tuning in for the first time, Diversity Saves is a 501c3 nonprofit organization made up of passionate creators, actors, and fans from marginalized communities who wanted to create a means to amplify voices not only in the community but in the works we consume across the industry. You can always learn more about us and see what we're up to at diversitysaves.org. Uplifting and amplifying is exactly what we are doing with our community showcase. I am your host, Nekola. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm here today with the cast of the Wildfire Club, which is part of Taíno Tales, a Latine-owned and operated Twitch channel. The Wildfire Club follows some residents of Harts Valley as they uncover a mystery and ask the important questions like, does this person count as a peer? Is my car nearby? Did photocopiers exist in the 80s? And most importantly, what happened to Amber Woods? Let's meet our guests because I have some burning questions of my own. We're going to start. Oh, I did just close the window that I was talking from. Since the Wildfire Club uses the Kids on Bike system, today's icebreaker question is, using the 6 stats of Kids on Bikes, which is brains, brawn, charm, fight, flight, and grit, which stat do you assign your personal highest and lowest dice? So your D20 and your D4. And I'm going to go first as the example. As I said, I'm Nekola. I use she, they pronouns. My D20 is going to go on grit because as a chronic illness baddie, I've learned to put up with a lot, and it is my superpower. And my lowest, my D4, is going on brawn because I am all brains, no brawn, and I will not help you move. Even though I love you and I'll bring you pizza. We're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Chris. Uh, I am the GM and producer over at Taino Tales. And with that, in terms of my stats, let's see here. I know for sure my fight is a D4. I've never fought anyone in my life, so I know I'm not doing good there. Um, in terms of D6, I say my flight is next. I'm not exact. I'm a natural sprinter, as the dwarves say. I'm not necessarily meant for long distance, and I'm not particularly too quiet when it comes to that. I think my next one would be so D8. I think my brawn is pretty up there. I think brawn might be the one that's there. Actually, no, I switched that. My D8's a charm. I can kind of talk my way out. And a D10, I know I can lift more than what I believe. So I would say D10 is for brawn. For my D, what am I forgetting here? So that was fight, that was flight, that was brawn. Oh, grit is going to be my D12 for sure because chronic illness. Yeah. Gotta live with it, bro. So D12 for grit, and the brains is D20. I'm gonna say I'm gonna give myself say I got a master's. I gotta give myself a D20 at least. It's like I went through
Okay,
that. So
what's your master's in? That's amazing.
health administration. It is not as it is like masters of health administration. It's just like,
It's a
yeah.
master's. It's what you gotta do. And also, chronic illness, we don't live with it, it lives with us.
That's
Uh,
right. You're
exactly.
stuck in here with me.
You are. And I'm making it everyone's problem. Just kidding. Next, we have Hamnah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hamnah. I use any and all pronouns, and I am both the tech producer for Wildfire Club as well as one of the cast members. I play Avataha, who uses he, him pronouns. Chris actually has my answer, so I'm sorry to be a repeater, which is to say that my D4 would be in fight. Also, because I've never been in a fight, so I'm not sure if I would be good or not. Like, it's there just by default because I don't know. It's the unknown. It's the like N factor. So somebody get in a fight with me, and then I
And you'll
can know
find
for
out if you
sure.
explode.
Yeah, and then I'll find out if I'm actually good at fighting or not. And then my D20 would also be in brains. Similarly, I'm a lifelong academic for better or for worse. I problem solve for a living. That's just kind of what I do. Read a lot of articles and papers and whatnot. So I like to think that my brain works good. So that's kind of me.
I love it. All right, and then we have Josephine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josephine. I play Lizzie Stone, resident repressed Jesus lesbian. Nekola, I think we are gonna have the same build as well. I feel like I probably would go for grit. That being said, my health has definitely been declining, so I think a second best would be fight, because I was a very scrappy kid, constantly fighting kids on the bus, very dirty ambushes all the time. And if you are my friend in real life, I'm constantly trying to engage in bloody knuckles or lumberjack with somebody. I don't know. I just want to establish a slap fight every time with my friends. I would say lowest stat is also brawn. Same reasons. I will not help you move. I will get you all the food and beer that is compensating worthy. Yeah, exactly.
I love it. All right, and then rounding it out with Cam.
Hi, I'm Cam. My pronouns are they, them. I think that my best stat, my D20, is going to be charm. I move through the world by being nice to people and making friends. And if that doesn't work, I really don't have another avenue most of the time. And I think my worst would be maybe fight. I feel like I can fight, not physically. I can fight, like I can argue and debate, but I can't physically fight. I don't lift. I don't work out.
If we're going verbal fight versus physical fight, then my answer is different. Because I can eviscerate a bitch. Like, verbally, I will make you hate yourself.
Yeah, verbally, I can do a roast. Verbally, I can do that. But if assuming fight is physical only,
yeah.
I was the youngest of 5 siblings, so you would think that I'm better at fighting. I'm not. I'm also not very fast.
Yeah, I am only vaguely familiar with kids on bikes, so I don't know if fight counts as verbal. We can leave that up to GM discretion. But yeah, oh my gosh, I love roasting people. It is the best. All right, so we're going to start off with the Wildfire Club, I believe, is Mythic Initiative number 3 on your channel, if I got the numbers right. So, Chris, why don't you give us kind of like an elevator pitch about what's going on over there? Because it seems like you've got a lot of shows, and I can't wait to catch up on all of them.
Yeah, so it's technically, so you're right in terms of like it's the third, it's its own separate thing, but in terms of like lineup wise, it's like the 4th in it because we had 2 seasons of the Mythic Initiative. But essentially, what the channel itself, Taino Tales, we focus on, creating fantastically weird worlds with fantastical plots and strange whole things there. Primarily at the moment, we do a bunch of shows, but they're primarily set within 2 settings. The first one, the one in which we're doing here, where it's set in the Wildfire Club, is known as the Weird Earth Saga. It is essentially more comic-y. It started off as urban fantasy, but as things have kind of got it added in, it's a little bit more comic-ish in terms of like how you usually think of Marvel. Like there is a bunch of magic, science, and everything in between. As you have monsters that are, you have your monster hunters, which is the Mythic Initiative. They deal with a lot of they recently dealt with aliens, they've dealt with robots, they've dealt with demons, they've dealt with pretty much everything known to man, and everything in between. And then we recently, before we did Wildfire Club, we had the Doomsayers, which were dealing with Greek gods, or gods of different myths. So they were more of about very much like a Batman mixed with stray gods, which that one was. And then we have the Wildfire Club, which is very much more Life is Strange inspired, and also a little bit witchy. So maybe a little bit of your Sabrina, your teenage witch vibes, or your Bewitched vibes is also kind of here as well. It's very that small town strangeness you usually find there. And the other kind of universe that we have is called the Era of Revolution. I've done that with Hamnah, with Forsaken. I've also done the Stewards War. Essentially, it is a steampunk high fantasy world which just really involves a bunch of gods fighting each other constantly, and the people that kind of get stuck in between. So that's primarily, we have our high fantasy and we have our retro fantasy in a sense. So you can get a little bit of whatever you're looking for there. And we're always building on top of that. So that's what we got over at the channel.
I love it. You were talking beforehand about writing, and I can't imagine how much writing you have to do and have done for all of these. And that's amazing. I'm very impressed. But let's hop into some questions about you all individually. And don't forget, chat, that if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and I will pop them in as we go through. Feel free to ask almost anything you want. We'll filter them for appropriateness. My computer just went weird. There we go. Anyway, moving on. So starting with, what was your introduction to TTRPGs and how long have you been playing? I heard we're going to get some interesting answers.
I'll go last because I just talked. So if you guys want to go before me, so I'm not just spieling at people. So somebody else go.
Yeah, mine is a short and sweet answer. I started with Monster Hearts 2 and in like 2016, and that is still very much primarily my favorite system. I think starting with Avery Alder and like one of the OG PBTA, and like I think it really basically set me up for my love of intimate horror games, like that everything kind of about like, oh, like you can explore transformation and puberty, adolescence, and queerness, and also even race with monstrosity as concepts. Like Monster Hearts very easily became just like #1 favorite thing. So yeah, since 2016.
I have to try that one. I haven't tried Monster Hearts yet.
I still need to. It's on my list.
That was my first when I started doing APs. Monster Hearts was the first thing I did over on Genhen Gaming. So that was my first professional way of playing games. Awesome game. Awesome game.
My first experience in TTRPG at all in general was a home game that I did with someone who I was living with at the time. I was roommates with one of the other players. So I was really lucky that every week it was at my house, even though I was not the DM. And we actually hired a DM. It was like a friend of a friend, and we hired them to lead us through, and it was a lovely experience. I highly recommend, if you were trying to get into TTRPGs, try hiring a DM. And I played it was a Dungeons and Dragons 5e campaign, and I played a Ranger Aasimar because I liked the idea of her being like Cupid.
That is so adorable.
Yeah. She was a redhead named Freya. It was really cliche on cliche on cliche.
Your first character usually is, and it's adorable.
Yeah.
For me, also it was somewhere around 2016, like early 2016, same as Joe. And I was in university, I was in undergrad, and I remember it was like it was like at night, and I was on campus. I was in this area called the Fishbowl, and people were talking about tabletops, and I like had never heard of them before. I didn't know what they were, and I was like, oh, like that would be kind of fun to do. And then like spontaneously we just like gathered a group of people, and we played a one shot of Everyone is John, which was very silly and a very ridiculous. Yeah, it's a very ridiculous way to like get introduced to tabletops, but it was a lot of fun, and benefit of like you don't need to prep for it, so it was very spontaneous, just like happened, because people wanted to like show me what a tabletop game was, and I really liked it. And after that, I like started playing like campaigns and things like that more regularly. But yeah, for those of you that might not know, Everyone is John is like an indie tabletop game where all of the players play as different facets of a character named John, and you were basically given you have a goal to complete, and John is an epileptic character, and so every time he falls asleep, you like switch It's like there's like a
Like a
slight
bidding
gambling.
system?
Yeah, bidding system where you have to like bid for control of John, basically, and it's a point system. There's a winner at the end. It is a competitive
Is
game.
this game based off of the movie Being John Malkovich?
I have no idea.
Maybe? I have no idea.
Very similar premise.
It might be.
Probably.
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna look this up now.
But it's a very silly game.
We, in the time that I played it, we did it for a charity stream, and one person like was so quiet and didn't do much, so that they could like bid the highest when it was the most inconvenient moment. Had John just fully leave and get on an airplane, because their goal was to meet Pitbull. And so John fully left the scene and got him. It was so chaotic. I love it so much.
Mr. Worldwide.
Yes, that was the goal, and it was beautiful. Anyways, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that was it. That was the end of the story. For me.
Then there was me. All right, so my story. I laugh because I always think back to like how I've gotten here and where it started from. I'm gonna be honest. I'm a dude. So it started back when I was like in this program at my college, and usually we do like I forget what it's called, like a master class or a capstone for that. And one of the people that was there was just a girl that I thought was real cute and whatnot. So, I didn't really know the person. So I'm like, okay, we got to find stuff to be in so that when we're working to, like creating an environment, we're like, oh, hey. And I noticed they opened their laptop, and right on their laptop, they were a Critical Role fan at the time. So I'm like, hey, what's that? And from there, the relationship didn't work out, but I stuck with that. And also, fun fact, voice acting also came from that as well, because they were a voice actor in a club that I actually became the president of for 2 years. It was the best fucking president that ever lived.
The lengths you go to impress a woman.
I go to incredible lengths, and then the thing is, I stuck with the stuff after it didn't work out. Cause I'm like, this is pretty cool. That didn't work out, but this I like. But it's very funny how that turned out. But unlike everybody else, I was not a player when I first started playing RPGs. I was a GM, because no one I knew personally liked the idea, but didn't know how to run it. And the rule of thumb is, kiddos, if you're the one that really wants to play the game, you gotta run it. And luckily, I had a minor in leadership studies, so I knew how to manage stuff. So my first system wasn't 5e. That came after. My first was Star Wars' Fantasy Flight system, or Fantasy Flight, I believe, are the guys that do it. So it's very much not 5e at all. It's very more improvish based. The general rule set of it is like you have success and failure dice, and depending on how you do, you can succeed but still fail, or you can fail with success. So it is very improvish, which I think only helped me when I eventually did a 5e campaign with my college friends. We did it for 5 years. We literally were like maybe 2 or 1 more sessions till we were done with the campaign, and we still haven't finished it to this day.
Oh no!
And it survived COVID, which is the funny part as well. I just got really busy, and everybody else. But yeah, my journey in this sphere has been a real wild ride, where you look at where it started.
Oh my goodness, that is wild. I love it though. What about your favorite settings? Like when you get to pick out your game and such, what kind of settings do you like? What's the second half of that question? And some of you have already said your favorite system, but also your favorite system and setting.
I'll do mine since I kind of was here. In terms of favorite system, I think if it's a Monster of the Week, I think it's a very important one to me, because it was my first show was based off Monster of the Week, and also Monster of the Week is very easy to pick up, and it helps you a lot with understanding how to write villains, because it's very episodic in learning. Monsters in that book have its own set of like, this one's the temptress, this one's the I'm just gonna kill you straight up, this one's the plotter. So I think it has a wonderful system of like, if you don't know how to make villains, it literally makes villains for episodic, longer arcs. It's a very wonderful system there. And again, the game is easy to run, and it's weird, which I always like, a little strangeness or weirdness to it. In terms of favorite settings, I haven't really gotten a chance to run them on stream yet, but I played them off. Cyberpunk Red, I love Cyberpunk. I sadly was one of the people that bought Cyberpunk 2077 on the PS4 when it first came out, so I was really committed to it. But I love the setting and the system. It was unique, and it's always all written by a POC author, which is always an A+ in my book. And the other one I have, Lancer. I loved Lancer. I'm a big. It gave me Halo vibes. I love Halo and whatnot, and it's the mech vibes, and also it has a wonderful system called sit reps, which is kind of like doing combat that isn't necessarily I shoot you, you shoot back. It's very objective based. So it was also wonderful, and I love the setting and everything behind it. So Lancer and Cyberpunk Red. And Monster of the Week are some of my favorite settings and systems.
I still want to play Lancer. I was supposed to be on a show that ended up falling through where we were going to play Lancer.
It's wonderful. It's crunchy. That's why it's a wonderful thing. Book. I don't know if I would run it on NAP because it's very, very, very crunchy, and there's easier ways to do mecha without all that crunch.
Who wants to go next?
I love, obviously, Monster Hearts 2. I've been playing a bunch of Vampire the Masquerade. I can't stop. Urban fantasy horror type stuff is always something that I'm really interested in. I've only played Spire City Must Fall once, also over at Bad House RPG, which is a very magic realism kind of urban fantasy at the same time. Would love to dip my toes into that again, but also love a very grimy, gritty Mork Bork into the odd situation as well. One of my another system that I started out with was Paranoia XP, and would love. We've talked about this, Cam. We've already talked about this.
You stole my answer.
Yeah, we gotta get into that one more time.
I guess I'll go next. You stole my answer, Josephine.
I'm sorry.
You son of a gun.
Oh, it's okay. I was gonna say I love Paranoia. Not really in production anymore, I believe. But a phenomenal game. And I know this is so basic, but I feel like my favorite system is usually just the system I am playing most currently. I get very, very into characters. I get very, very into settings. A setting that I always love, that I know is basic and I don't even care, is a school setting. Give me an adventuring academy or a superhero academy or something. Eat that shit up. It has built-in drama and dynamics that I just appreciate a lot. And also I like playing a moody teenager. It's a fun time for me. I think lately, God Killer. I started playing it with my wonderful partner, and it's so fun because we each are running two different games at the same time, and they're very different vibes from each other, and it's a lot of fun. So, highly suggest.
God Killer is really fun.
God Killer is great, and it's so collaborative. Ugh.
Shout out to Connie.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. You're a real one. I saw you this weekend. You're a real one.
My favorite system is easily Invisible Sun. It is a Monty Cook system, and it's a surrealist setting where you play as Weasley or magic users in the real world. Our world is not the real world, but there's a real world and you get pulled into it, and in that world it's surrealism, it's magic, it's very very strange, and I really like it for that, and also because all of the classes are it's asymmetric gameplay, so they all have completely different mechanics and very different play styles. It is, I will say, it is notorious for being very difficult to learn because it was Monty Cook's art project, basically. And so I own the Black Cube, and the cube it has like 4 different books, like a bunch of different stuff, and like all the information is scattered across the books, and there's like it's basically a little scavenger hunt to like learn how to play this game. And personally, that endears me to the game. It does also make it really hard to learn and to convince people to play with you. But if you put in the effort, I think it's worth it because it's such a fun system. Like easily like the system that I go back to and try to get people to play and try to get people to learn. In terms of settings, I don't really think I have like a particular setting that I'm like drawn to or anything. I'm more so drawn to like themes in a campaign rather than a setting. Like I don't really care if we're playing sci-fi, fantasy, we're in a school, we're, and playing a office drama, whatever. I don't really like mind too much either way. For me though, like I love when we get to do political intrigue in a campaign. That's my favorite theme to play with. Like I love getting to like be somebody important part of a larger political ecosystem of like other important people and groups and trying to like politic your way through to different objectives and stuff. That's like some of my favorite gameplay and role play to do with people. I love the power games. I love the power games.
This is fantastic. Selfishly, this question always gives me more things to go look at. So when I watch it back later, I will take notes and have all these new games. That Invisible Sun, I think is what you just said, sounds really interesting.
It's
like,
very cool.
The kind of complicated that I like. All right. Next, there we are. What about what other nerdy obsessions outside of TTRPGs are you into? Like me, I'm a crafter. I love to craft and also play Dreamlight Valley all the time.
I think perhaps the most in theme / boring answer is that I am obsessed with the Life is Strange series, like the video games. Like to the point where I have a tattoo for the game series. Like I love it that much. So I adore the stuff that Don't Nod, the company that makes Life is Strange, like puts out. I love those games. I like to read. I love board games. Like that's a lot of fun as well. I'm very like for me, I'm very like I like a lot of things and I'm very curious about a lot of things. So I find that I don't really tend to get obsessed. Like I don't have hyperfixations. I don't obsess about anything. I'm more of like I'm trying a new thing this week and the next week I'm trying something else new and then the other week I want to try something else kind of person. So chances are if there's a thing out there, I probably want to do it with you. So take me and teach me.
It sounds like your hobby then is hobbies. And I
yeah.
love that.
I'll go next. I similarly to you actually, Hamnah. I wouldn't call myself like obsessive about anything in particular. There's a lot of things that I know a lot about and a lot of things that I know a little about, like enough to get me by. But I don't tend to like go super crazy on stuff, with the exception being Sailor Moon. Or unfortunately, this is me coming out, I am a Disney adult. I know it's embarrassing. I was raised in this and it stuck with me. I have a tattoo and everything. And I know that is not a cool thing to be nerdy about, but
I have a Lion King tattoo.
There.
Like, don't even worry.
Look, Disney's in my backyard. All I got to do is get a ride over and I'm there.
My first adult job was working for Disney. Like, Disney is inevitable.
Yeah. But yeah, I like Sailor Moon a lot. I like Disney. Or at least earlier Disney, not necessarily the newer stuff. But I also am just a big like history and film nerd. Very into like listening to documentaries in my spare time or while I'm at work. So I think that kind of thing, especially about Tudor England and about the like Ottoman Empire and stuff.
I'm gonna have to hit you up later for some of those documentaries because
I'll throw some at you. Yeah.
Video essays all day during work. That is what I love to do.
Oh, same. My screen time is horrible.
I need to follow up on that. I'm gonna take it.
Amen.
The Ottoman. Have you seen real quick just before I go by? Have you seen the Netflix thing that they did with the Ottomans for the Ottoman Empire? They did Ahmed II's conquest of Constantinople and then his
I didn't see
battle
that.
with Vlad. Oh, you need to watch it. It's like one of those
I
things where they
didn't
do
see that.
drama and documentary at the same time.
I'm into like I like I don't know if you've ever seen this like Turkish drama, but there's one that follows that's like a series that goes through the Ottoman Empire. And there's one series that follows Harem Sultana. And I love that. Oh, the outfits. She's such a serve. Oh, love her. I got really into that history because of that drama series.
I'm also a big history nerd. I like crime stuff as well. I've watched Narcos a lot of times. But overall history and all that stuff is lovely. As you can probably see from the guy who made a show about it in the 80s. He was very much a very big history nerd guy. I'm also I love games and whatnot. I'm a big strategist kind of person, so literally the love of my life is between history nerd and this, Crusader Kings 3. I have over 400 hours in this game and still counting. I have a whole library of games and I always end up booting it up and playing it over and over and over again. I have a problem. But I love that. And movies as well. I'm a big I love movies and TV shows. I'm trying to be better in watching new things because I tend to because of my time, I tend to like watch things that I've already seen. So it's like I can enjoy it but still work on stuff. But right now I'm going through Reel of Time, so I'm on season 3, which apparently people have problems with. So I'm seeing it, I'm watching it. So, but I love watching new shows, and it usually helps with understanding what kind of stories I can go into because you never know where inspiration might come from. And also, I recently started watching like how video games are made. Like one of my favorite documentaries is the God of War with the reboot that they're making Kratos was great. And I've seen Arcane's how did they make that over and over and over again because I'm obsessed. But that's me. That's what I'm into.
I love it. Moxberry in chat just said rookie numbers. I got 2.6 thousand hours in Gary's mod, and
I had a lot in Gary's mod back in the day. Gary's mod was high school for me. That was high school, Chris. He had a lot of hours. That's why everybody was on. It was Call of Duty and Gary's mod back in the day. Is what it was.
That is so many hours. All right. Go ahead, Josephine.
Oh, no worries. I have 464 hours in Stardew Valley and 773 hours in Baldur's Gate 3.
Nice.
Baldur's Gate is actually a dress-up game and a resource and inventory game for me, and Stardew Valley. Sorry, my microphone volume keeps going all over the place. I apologize. And Stardew Valley is actually a game about a trash wizard, and that is how I play those games. I would say I think a surprising quote-unquote nerdy obsession that I have is that I guess like similar to like movies and like film and stuff, I'm like weirdly obsessed with like celebrities. I know a lot of actors' names and things like that. It's kind of it's really difficult I guess for most of the people that I hang around with at the very least to like memorize names and faces, but for whatever reason like actors and stuff, I have that on lock. I don't know why. I'm just like obsessed. I am very parasocial, I think, when it comes to liking and getting into certain things. I really like Asian historical fiction. There is I think it's one of those animes where it's either Josei or Seinen, like whatever. But Oku, Ooku, is about what if a third of Japan's male population fell sick to a very specific disease that like just killed again like a third of like the potential shogun heirs and things like that, and what if the shogun were actually a series of women that had to hide the fact that they were women in the first place. So very fascinated in those types of like speculative things. Love to read plays, love Broadway, love K-pop. So there's lots of little nerdy pockets out there in the TTRPG community for sure.
Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. I'm very bad at remembering like too many celebrities unless they are currently in drama, and then I just will drink up celebrity drama because I don't know, I just love it. It's pretty fun. All right, so we're going to transition a little bit into talking more about the show, but we're going to start with how we got here. For Chris, it is what inspired you to start the channel and the Wildfire Club, and then everyone else, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I'll go first. For me, how the channel started, primarily it is kind of the ode of creators and more of an actor of anything, because originally I was a voice actor before I started doing this stuff, and I am still a voice actor. But with acting, it is you have to be lucky. And lucky doesn't necessarily mean I'm like lucky. It's when preparation meets, an opportunity there. But for the most part, is a lot of rejection. And you have the skill, and especially with being an actor, you want to be doing something, because it's just part of you likes doing that. Especially for me, I like doing that stuff. But the problem is that there's not a lot of projects, and there is a lot of people that want to be on projects. So after looking about it, I had some time. The dreaded pandemic came around, so a lot of people had time in their hands, for me as well. And I decided to try it out, or try out a show, try making a show. Even though I had no idea what to do. Luckily, I was in a lovely server, Utopia, with those folks over there, and they helped out a lot with like, here's what you need. This is, you're gonna need somebody for tech. Here's this and this and this. So I started building it over time. Primarily, the main reason was partly that because I wanted to make my own projects and sort of show what I can do out there. But the other thing is there isn't a lot of Latin folks that are kind of at the front and center when it comes to shows like this. There are channels out there that are Latine-owned, and I'm supporting them and whatnot. But usually back a little while ago, there wasn't a lot, and there is even less people that are in the GM slot and producer slot that are Latin as well, that I know of. And I say that a lot because it's a big space, and I'm still finding people to this day of like, oh, you exist. It sucks that I just saw you, but you exist. But from what I know, there isn't a lot. So I wanted to be, it's very much be the change you want to see in the world. So I came out at that point of like, let's make a show. And we did the Mythic Initiative. We did that show. It went great. I don't remember how it came about, but I decided to submit it for WebFest, just to submit it. I didn't think I was going to win anything out of it. And we got nominated a bunch, and we did win an award for the very first show I ever made. And I was like, well, clearly I'm doing something right, and decided to keep moving forward. It's funny because the channel didn't get its name and sort of presence until after, I want to say probably after the first season of the Mythic Initiative, because the Twitter was just the Mythic Initiative, and that was it. But I was like, we're going to be doing more stuff than this. And I was trying to think of a name, and I chose Taino. That's kind of what I go by, primarily because I am Puerto Rican, Cuban, and Dominican all at once. And it's very much a mouthful when you're trying to tell people where are you from, or what are you? It's very much of like, I'm this, and this every time I have to say that. So I just go by Taino because, for those who don't know, Taino is just another word for the indigenous people of the Caribbean, which my family comes from. My grandfather and my grandparents, all of them came from the islands and moved into immigrated over to the U.S. in about around 50s, 60s. So I am technically the second generation in my family. So I'm not too far off. It's still pretty recent in terms of us coming over here. And primarily that's how we started this. In terms of how the show started, God, I'm trying to remember I think it may be because at the time, it's about a year ago, Don't Nod, the same people who did Life is Strange, announced Bloom and Rage, and I was like, man, I love this. And with that, I decided to actually play Life is Strange. I didn't play the first one because I kind of already knew what happened. The second one, I took me a while to complete because it was Latine focused on brothers, and it was a very near and dear because I'm the oldest brother and I'm Latine. So when I finished the first episode, I sat down and about 6 months passed because I was like, I cannot. It hit too close to home, and I was like, I need time. So I literally put it down. I was like, we'll come back when I'm feeling better. 6 months, and then I went through the story. It was wonderful, and then I played the next one, Life is Strange: True Colors, which the show is heavily inspired by, and loved it, and thought, well, this is really cool, and I think we can make a show out of this. And it's partly funny because the minute I kind of suggested the idea of like, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm gonna like a cat came at the door scratching and like, please, for the love of God, please. And I was like, okay, yeah, we're doing this, and that's kind of how it started in terms of the show and the channel itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's my answer is, Chris said, I'm gonna do a Life is Strange show, and I immediately started being Eric Andre shaking the gates, being like, let me in, let me in.
And it's funny because usually my rule of thumb when I do shows, I try not to cast people twice over, because I like to, give one new people an opportunity to play and whatnot. But Hamnah, I was like, I could not in my heart look Hamnah in the eye every day. But like, I did a Life is Strange show. I didn't pick you. Like I couldn't.
Hey, it would have been okay. I understood that.
You would have been okay. It would not have been for me. I would have had to live with that guilt for the rest of my life. And I was like, no, this is for you. So partly this show's also for Hamnah, because you're such a wonderful, wonderful person and producer. It's like, this is for you to feast on, child.
Cam and I just applied and we were chosen.
I was reached out to and was like, hey, we think you're cool. You want to come be part of this channel? And I was like, I'm not Latina, right? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. So.
Hey, quick and simple. I mean, sometimes just applying creates the greatest shows. And all right, so diving into your characters that you play, who I am obsessed with, and I love them all. And if by the end of this Lizzie doesn't get her kisses on, I'm gonna be really sad. That is currently the thing that I am obsessed with. But anyways, let's go through and talk a little bit about your character that you're playing. And Chris, you play a lot of characters, so you can pick a couple, any of them but Frank. I hate him. Sorry, I'm being blunt. Anyways, but what inspired your character, and the subplot of that is how much of yourself you put into your character. Not everybody does that, but if you do, kind of just introduce the rest of the world to you.
I wrote my shit down.
Yes.
If I should go first. So the inspiration for my character is that Lizzie has existed for an extremely long time, since 2021, probably. Yeah, so Lizzie's first iteration she was like a earth elemental, basically, like an earth elemental midwife, who was like pregnant and in a loveless marriage, and like it was like a straight Lizzie like universe, basically. And so kind of how she, I don't know, graduated or like kind of changed or like turned, like the elements that maintain is that there is this like community leader type lady. She holds a lot of oppression, inside of her, and that led to a lot of when I tried to translate her into a more modern story, what that immediately came into was like a lot of internalized misogyny and homophobia. But there had always been this element of like a God-fearing, Jesus-loving, like a horse girl, earth element type thing, and I translate that into like she's like a Taurus is her zodiac sign. And there's always this little bit of like a husband who sucks. And there's like a little secret infidelity under the guise of girls liking each other doesn't count. But you root for that secret infidelity anyway because she's just so unhappy, and like with that little secret aspect, like I guess not to talk so much. I don't know how much to talk about in the first place, but we do start out her introduction with her and a very clearly loveless marriage where she only has sex with her husband once a year or something. Yes. And she had absolutely been flirting with another like femme person at the bar that she works at, but like not processing that as flirting or like certain touches or like even maybe sleeping in the same bed as her, not viewing that as like an emotional type of cheating whatsoever, because we're just both gals. It's fine. Like it's not real. It can never be real. I'm married. It doesn't matter. And then for that to turn itself on its head eventually is always the arc of what Lizzie kind of carries as a character. So yeah, that's Lizzie.
Who's next?
I'll go next. Mine is pretty simple and easy. I read the premise and I kept on getting these videos, these shorts on YouTube of the TV show Yellowstone. Yep. And I was thinking about like, well, who would I like to see? Who would I be? And I thought that they were severely lacking a lesbian in there. So it was kind of a mix of Tater from Yellowstone and Beth a little bit, mostly Tater. And honestly, Arizona, her looks is really heavily inspired by one of my best friends. Because it started off with me being like, oh, she'll be a blonde and she'll have her hair cut in this way. And then I was like, this is exactly the vibe of my absolute soulmate who is a blonde and has her hair cut in this way. And I just thought, everyone is going to be so intense. I wanted a character that was lighter and more fun and kind of didn't take herself too seriously. And I really resonate with the story of the poor kid in a wealthy area, because that was me growing up. I was the poor kid in a really wealthy area. I was like the kid with the fucked up family in a really wealthy area. And when you're in that position, there's only a few routes that you are kind of allowed to go down typically, which is usually either you're a criminal, like, or you're seen as a criminal, you're seen as like the bad kid, or you have to be the funny one. And I decided that, hell, let's make her the fucking funny one, and also let's make her a criminal. So she's very, very heavily has a lot of me and like what I imagined myself to be at 26 when I was 14. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, well, I heard that we were doing a Life is Strange show, so I thought, kind of similar to Cam, but for Life is Strange, my thought was, well, if I was in this universe, like, what character would I want to be, or would I play, or what would I create for this world? And thinking about the themes of the Life is Strange series as well, and thinking about everything that has happened, my thought was, okay, what if I made a character that was a combination of Chloe Price and Rachel Amber, but worse? And so I mashed those two together, um, and I created Ava, um, who is just a genderqueer dream. I much of his like physical appearance is just like me sending a wish to the universe for like what I would like to look like. And generally speaking, I mean, Ava as a character, he comes from a like relatively well-off, like upper middle class family, and that puts him at odds with his parents because his views are very much like anti-capitalist, kind of like leftist, and having to contend with what it means to come from a family of affluence when you have that for yourself, right? What does that mean for your politics? Ava's very into music and very into using that as a way to benefit the people around him and like his community. Ava genuinely really loves Hearts Valley and like the people in it, even if that isn't necessarily always returned. Like he does genuinely really like the town and like the place. And then the kind of like last piece to Ava's story is that Chris asked us, like, who do you lose in the fire? Who do you want your characters to lose? And my answer, after checking in with, the cast and everything about it, my answer was that I want Ava to have been in an abusive relationship, and for him to lose his abusive boyfriend in the fire. And so, everybody else's losses are very sad. For Lizzie, I think it's a little bit of both. But generally speaking, people see the wildfire as being this like terrible tragedy that happened. And I thought it would be really interesting to explore what if, Ava doesn't see it that way? What if to him the wildfire was not a tragedy, but a godsend? What if that was like the day that he was like freed, right? Like what if he saw it positively instead? And how does that kind of maybe put him at odds with some of the townsfolk, and how like what complicated like grieving process does that look like afterwards? And so that's kind of like the story that's coming out there. And for me, really, Ava is like my like love letter both to the Life is Strange series, which means so much to me, but also to survivors of relationship abuse. I had an abusive partner once myself, and like so for me it was very important. I thought this was kind of like a good setting to be able to explore what does it mean to not like the abuse while it's happening, but in this case, like what does it mean to live with and process and contend with the weird, complicated emotions that happen when it's over? Because you think that it's just okay, it's done and it's great and everything's sunny and rosy now, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And what does it look like for it to be complicated afterwards?
Yeah, and I think for me, as Cam said, I think the other thing that inspired me to make the show was Yellowstone, because my mom was watching it and I was like, well, I guess to check it out. I mean, as you keep seeing clips on YouTube shorts are very persuasive, because it's like, it looks pretty good. It looks a pretty good show. I guess I'll watch it. It's like, yeah, that algorithm's working. Um, but primarily, Life is Strange was an inspiration for the setting and its people, as well as Yellowstone. But primarily, the other like third thing was my own life. Fun fact: I originally lived in New York City, and then when I got to like the end of elementary school, I moved to upstate New York. So I went from like the inner city to like very much kind of like a Hearts Valley setting of just like a small town outside of New York that's very much community based, known as it was Suffern, New York, specifically Hillburn was the name of our place. And we lived next to a mountain called Bear Mountain. It was a very strange place that we've been there. So my summers there, my entire life there was essentially a kids on bikes campaign. Mine is like all the craziness that usually comes with it. But primarily, I kind of used my own experience growing up in the small town and understanding, how people interact, especially that when you're the new kid, you have to kind of learn how things click. And for me, the entirety of my life as a child, I've never really clicked with anybody. I was very much of like I made my own spaces rather than trying to join spaces is usually what I end up doing, and it usually always works out for the best. But I felt that, especially with this campaign as well, like trying to create people that don't necessarily fit in to society in the way that they normally want you to fit in. And exploring that and using my own experiences with people I know in my own life. Frank is a little bit of me as a kid.
Oh
I very
no!
much
Now I feel bad.
no, he's fine. He was weird. He's a weird kid. He was weird for no reason. Like it's just like, bro, be normal. Like you could be quirky. You don't have to be weird. But he's a little bit of me, and I was also a little arrogant. I've had very funny moments where I'm like, I like to all you to thank me for coming to my birthday party. I don't know what was going on in my mind as a child to say like, this is the thing to say. But Frank was there, and kind of a little bit of inspirations from that. In terms of other people, Percy and all of them were more like Yellowstone that I took inspirations from, but also in my own life of people that kind of understand, that they may not do legal things, but when the time comes for you to help out, they'll help you out when you're in a situation without really asking for anything. And fun fact, if you ever want to see what my town looks like, it sucks so much because, as I said before, I love crime movies, Martin Scorsese, I love his more films. He actually came to my town and filmed in it when I moved far past it. If you ever see The Irishman, the town that they have there, that's like this old vintage place. That's what it actually looks like. It actually looks that old. We had a movie theater where it didn't really play trailers. We had a guy with a piano and an organ who played on top until the movie came on, and we got maybe 1 or 2 trailers in. And we had your church, and we had there was a situation with that there. I literally, my family stopped going to church at a certain point during that time. So I've had a lot of that small town drama and understanding with that there that kind of informed me making this setting. Even to like the mall. We had the Palisades Mall, which is like, I'm gonna say it's a really good mall, but it did hurt small business. But it's a really good mall. It had a movie theater on the top, but then again, small business. So a lot of it came from my own life and TV shows when it came to making these characters and this setting.
I totally. So I was saying before we started that I currently live in a tiny little town. This is one of my 3 co-hosts. This is Moby. He just came up and needed a little love. So say hi, Moby. No, he just wants the love.
Hi, Moby.
Yeah, I'm in one of those little small towns like Harts Valley. It's sort of catching up to this century, but it is. Harts Valley is a great representation. Okay, you're gonna be like this. Anyways, all right. So we are almost. We're kind of reaching the halfway point. So I'm gonna pose one more question before we go to break, and then give a heads up that we're gonna get a little spoilery in the second half. But I sort of prepped y'all for this question. I am very new to Life is Strange. This Kids on Bike has been heavily influenced by Life is Strange. So what is it? From what I've gathered so far, it is a video game. But like, what is it, and how is it working into the Kids on Bike system the way that you all have done it? It sounds fascinating.
I'll let you describe what Life is Strange is, because I feel like even though I played it, I feel like you're more of like a PhD in Life is Strange than I am, and then I explain how it influenced the game.
All right, everybody sit down. No. So Life is Strange is a series of video games made by Don't Nod. With an exception, there is a prequel game that was made by Deck 9, which is it was a functionally like lovingly called a fan-made game because the developers at Deck 9 were huge fans of the Life is Strange series, and so they were given permission by Don't Nod to make an official prequel to the series. That one's actually my favorite of the series. Not that anybody asked, but basically, the Life is Strange series always follows different protagonists, and the protagonists have some sort of power that they discover as part of the game. So in the first one, for example, you play as Max Caulfield, who discovers that she has the power to turn back time very like limitedly, so she can like rewind and like redo stuff. And every game follows functionally a tragic event that happens, and you as a protagonist are dealing with that tragedy in some way. So in the first game, what happens is that Max Caulfield's childhood friend Chloe Price gets shot and dies, and so she rewinds to prevent that from happening, and then the whole game is basically just you dealing with that. It's a little bit of like a Final Destination situation of like Chloe keeps dying and you keep having to prevent it from happening, and there's like a whole sort of like overarching theme about it. But the Life is Strange series, generally speaking, tends to be themes of grief, of being in community with other people, of love, and of identity. Those are kind of the general themes of all of the games. They are quite heavy. They're narrative based games. They're very like choices matter. So if you so there's like branching paths to the games, and the games will change the narrative and what happens based on the decisions that you make as a player. But yeah, I generally really like them a lot. They're very fun. I recommend them.
Yes, my favorite is 2. I gotta go to the Latinos. 2. True Colors is a third, second, coming in second. But the second one, if you made me stop playing your game for 6 months, you did a good job. But in terms of understanding that theme and understanding all that, picking a system was a bit of a challenge, because I was like, whenever I'm thinking a system for an AP, there is a matter of, is it going to fit with what I'm thinking for? Because usually I think of the show first before I think of a system, because you'll have an easier time of like building it if you understand where you're coming from. Um, but there was a matter of, does it fit with the theme I'm going with, and then also a matter of crunch. When you have crunchy stuff like 5V and whatnot, you tend to go longer and it becomes a little bit harder and harder for people to perform because they're like trying to focus on numbers, which isn't everybody's game. And I was trying to look about. There was a number of wonderful suggestions. Hamnah has a wonderful game that they're showing off right now with Lizzie's house, which is, I said it, Lori's house. There we go. My brain crossed the wire.
Close
Maybe
enough.
Lizzie's
It could
house
be
is
maybe.
Lori's house. Yeah, it's a neighborhood. But Lori's house. I did that system, but it was more time loopy, and with this story and system, I didn't want it to be like, you can fix this. Because a point of it was grief, and I think it was important that this thing does happen, and you can't necessarily change that. But I came across Kids on Bikes. I was a big Kids on system fan. I've done literally all the other ones that they've done of teens, brooms. I actually didn't do bikes till now, but there still was a problem of like, okay, we have Kids on Bikes, which is usually meant for a system where you're playing. It's more like Strange. It's more of like you're playing these people in a small town and there's a mystery. Something weird is happening. Usually what happens is that you are playing normal people, and then you have an NPC who is the powered individual, who is, the 11, or who is this, Chloe, or, anybody like that. You have that person who has the power, but you don't necessarily, you are not them. And it wasn't as fun just to be playing normal people, because I wanted to add a little bit of something strange or something. Because Weird Earth, the whole point of it is that it's very much like our own Earth, but there's certain things in it that makes it strange and weird that's different. So I came up with the bold idea to hack it. Luckily, at the time, Dimension 20 had just released their rule set for Never Stop Blowing Up. And also, I used Abria Igar's kind of magic. They redid their magic for the second season of, I'm trying to remember the series name.
Misfits in Magic?
Misfits in Magic, yes. The second season, they had like exploding dice, but for magic, it would exploding and then it would reset. So I essentially took, okay, we take the exploding dice system that Abria had and change it up a bit. Primarily with we had milestones to our thing, so it's like when you hit certain explosions, your dice does go up, but it's very much of like you're gaining more power, but there's a negative side effect. For our game, there's a negative side effect of first it's like physical, so it's not too bad. The second one is like your stats actually change for a bit, and then the one we haven't gotten to yet is you lash out or you go uncontrollable, because that's kind of something that happens in Life is Strange. Of like sometimes the main character's power will go out of control, whether they stop time or they flip cars all over the place or they experience an emotion so deeply that they forget who they are. So I felt that was a component that was needed to be added in there. Added a bit of harm because, just make sure keep everybody in the toes, because the original game for Kids on Bike doesn't necessarily have a harm system. It's just like you get hurt. So we added that, and essentially kind of duct tape together a rule set to allow people to play power PCs, because I think Kids on Bikes is a wonderful system, but I think it is not fair that we don't get to be the power PCs. Let me be a little weird with this, man. Let me levitate something to solve the mystery. So that's kind of what we did there, and how it kind of came about. This system that is actually because luckily I was talking with people and people heard about it. The main people at Hunters Entertainment heard about it and were like, you want to make this an official hack? Because apparently there was only one official hack of Kids on Bikes, and it is never stopped blowing up. So when we release it, it will be Dimension 20's Never Stop Blowing Up, and our Wildfire Club rule set is going to be the only two official hacks so far, which is still a wild sentence I say every time it comes out of my mouth.
It's
So
amazing, though. That's so cool.
it is. I'm not a designer. I will say that up front. I've just jerry-rigged the rules in a way I'm like, this works.
You were describing all game designers. I need you
I
to
know,
understand.
but I still feel like I have to press it with like, hey man, I'm not a professional at this.
It's all good. All right. So we are going to take a couple minute break. Go refill your drinks, take a little bio break, whatever you need to do. When we come back, we're going to get a little spoilery, because we're going to dive even deeper into these characters and scenes and, just all that jazz. Anyways, we shall see you in a few minutes. Bye. There we go. Hello, welcome back. I am here with the cast of the Wildfire Club, and uh, let's get into some questions. We have some really good questions coming up from chat. Chat, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. I'm going to work them in as we go. But so we started talking about your characters before the stream ended, and I hesitated responding so that we could save some of the spoilers for after the break and give people warning that obviously there's going to be spoilers. I am obsessed. I love how we have been learning bits and pieces as we go. Confession, I still have 30 minutes left of the 4th episode, so I don't know the ending of that one, but I'm very excited for it. But how, I did not prepare you for this question. How have you worked out, like, the pacing for how you're going to reveal these little things as you go? You know, how it was either in 3 or 4 where Lizzie, you know, talking to Ava about Lola, whom I love. But then, you know, we also are learning in real time about Arizona's criminal history and current criminal actions. And then it's just all. So how do you prepare to, like, release that little by little?
Yeah, I think this is me primarily because I see all my cast members looking directly at me. Like, yeah, what just happened? For me, it kind of ties into the way I produce shows, which is a little bit differently. Primarily, what I do is before I bring anybody on a show, before I do any of the stuff that you normally would when you're onboarding people and doing that, I kind of plan out my shows in terms of understanding where I'm going to start and where I'm going to finish and what happens in between. Excuse me. I primarily do that. I use a program just because I got it from way back when I was doing work at a hospital called Visio. It's essentially just I do a flow chart in a sense. Yeah, I do Visios for all my shows. So essentially I go, this is episode 1, this is what's in episode 1, and then this is the finale, or this is where I want to end up. And usually I kind of build out over time of like, so if this is happening in this episode, then this is going to happen next episode, and then that. And then usually I have an understanding of like, what is the season going to look like? It's very similar to how like television kind of works, of like understanding this is the beginning, this is the end, and this is what's in between. Because essentially it helps you in a number of ways. One, as you said before, pacing. Usually what I do is when I understand where I need to go and what things need to be revealed at a certain time, I understand how many episodes I have until I need to reveal that thing, or where we need to touch upon that so we understand what's going on. The other thing that we kind of go into even more in depth is beat sheets. Very similar to like how, you know, when you bring, you know, actors get a call sheet of like, this is what we need to be in, and this is what we're going to be doing at this, and this time. I do that for my episodes as well. My players always know kind of a rough idea of what's going on. Not enough that they're spoiled and they don't have fun, but just enough to be like, if you get lost in the scene, this is where we kind of need to end up before break, and this is where we need to end up before we finish, which everybody loves. And I learned that from the wonderful Connie Chang, because that's what they do for Transplaner. And it works wonders for me because it helps me understand of this is what needs to happen in the first half of the episode, and this is what needs to happen in the second half of the episode. And the best part about all this is it's modular. For anybody who doesn't know what that term is, you know, it's like how NASA used to have a rocket shuttle back in the day that they would kind of reuse to constantly go up and down. Everything I build is modular in the sense of like nothing I have is set in stone. Things change. For example, the next episode we have this week, I wrote literally from scratch because what I originally had makes no more sense anymore. I was able to scrap bits of it that are helpful to the episode, but that whole thing that I originally had in my head makes no sense whatsoever and is really never going to come up again. So everything I have can change at any moment. And it helps when I have everything written out, because at least I'm not panicking to like I have to do this whole thing. It's like, okay, we have to change a thing, but we still have to end up here or try to get here by the end of this. And also because players make choices. That's the whole point of APs and playing TTRPGs. People make choices that I would have never accounted for that end up sometimes making me look smarter than I am. I like, oh man, how did you know this and this is gonna happen? It's like, I did it. You did. You made that happen. One of my favorite parts, I may be skipping ahead a bit, but for Cam's character, Arizona, and I went to Frank and we're like, hey, can I see the cam footage of like what you caught for today? He's like, oh yeah, sure. And he showed, again, spoiler alert for anybody, it's just usually the last warning, but it showed clips of Lizzie's parents and Arizona's father together. And then later on we learned, it's like, hey, they were in a cult together. That would be explaining why they were meeting up. But it's an also, it answers questions, but also proposes questions of like, why were they meeting up? Why at the mountain? Why this, and this? So it's useful, and that's why it kind of feels like pacing is usually on point, because I have an understanding of where we need to go, and I provide enough for my players to understand of like, here's the room you get to explore. It's very much like a video game where it's like you have an area you can explore, but you can't go off the map yet. That usually works. And the funny part to me is, even when I do beat sheets, people tend to forget, and then they still end up surprised at the end of the day, which like, it still worked. So it always is lovely to watch go down. So that's for me and pacing wise. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else.
I was gonna say, it does very much feel like not even just that we as the performers are like actors that get the script in, that like, you know, we do the table read and stuff like that. Like, we're also the character writers. Like, we are the people who form and shape like which scenes happen next, and then Chris kind of fills in the world as like, you know, the creating the animated backgrounds as like we follow along at the same time. There's a question that you have written that you know, who knows if we'll end up getting there, but that is what is it? How different do you find performing from an actual play to be from playing at a regular table? It's very much story beats. Like, I think we're maybe half on rails most of the time when it comes to Wildfire Club, because there are clearly still things that are very much surprises to all of us, but there is like that very happy medium of like that compromise of like secrets and safety, thinking about the way that certain beats and things come through for us, and it keeps it interesting, but also it keeps it so that you know, nothing comes out of left field in terms of safety, stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, it's very much just like, I know who the character is at the beginning of the story, and I know where I want the character to be by the end. Like, I know what the arc I want is, and then all in the middle is kind of figured out as we kind of move along. It's very much just looking at a session and then asking myself, what would make sense for the next emotional character narrative beat? What would make sense for the next place to be? What's the next step? And then asking Chris basically to put that in for the next episode, or for the next, you know, episode after that or something. You know, I can usually feel out like, okay, we're getting to a point where it'd be useful for this information to come out, or for Ava to have this interaction with this other character. You know, one of the things that we do is at the end of every session, we do stars and wishes. And as part of that, the wishes part, I think, really helps us plan out. Bless you. Helps us plan out.
Mike wouldn't catch that.
Helps us plan out and integrate like all of our arcs together, not only with each other as like PCs, but also with the overall narrative as well.
I definitely agree with you know, everything that's been said. One thing that I appreciate, in particular, different from a table, a home table versus an actual play, and one thing that I appreciate so much that in particular Chris has brought in my experiences of an actual play is the collaboration. Oftentimes it feels like in a home game or at a table that's not being filmed, essentially, you're kind of being led through the story. And in this case, it feels like we all have really, really strong inputs on like where we want our characters to go and where we would like the story to touch on. And I appreciate that communication, not only with the GM, with Chris, but also with Hamnah and Josephine, getting all of us together to be able to say like, hey, I really want to try out this, or I'd love to see this from this person's character. That kind of thing. I think it fosters a much more like writer's room environment than it does a typical, GM and party relationship.
It is very obvious, at least to me, how connected you all are with these characters, and so it's really cool to hear how you've planned this out, because I feel like everything flows seamlessly. I can only think of one time where somebody had to stop to be like, actually, what would my character do? And it was Arizona deciding whether to shoot the tire or the shoulder. But most of the time, it is just, boom, you are so connected that you know exactly what your character would do in this moment. And it really shines through. And I just want to throw out that compliment. Part of another question was touched on, so I want to give Chris and Hamnah a chance to answer it if you would like, about like what do you feel your biggest differences are at playing live and playing at a unstreamed table.
I'll go to you, Hamnah, because
Sure.
less feeling for me, more you.
Sure. Honestly, for me, there isn't a ton of difference between a home game and an AP. At least the way that I like to run APs and APs that I like to be a part of. Like that kind of like Cam was saying, that kind of collaboration and that very intentional. Like, here's what I want for my character. Here's what I want from a story. My favorite home games are also run like that, and we also play like that. As well there. And so for me, there's not a ton of difference. I think the biggest thing is that an AP is very much concerned with like production value and like how the audience is going to receive it, right? That's part of the equation when you make anything for consumption, is you have to think at least a little bit about, how are people going to receive this? How are people going to interpret this? And what are the things we have to consider and account for when we're creating this show, when we think about the audience. And for a home game, there is no audience, so you don't have to worry about that, right? The only people you have to really be concerned about is each other at the table. So, for example, like if this was a home game, there might be some different conversations to be had and things like that, versus like telling of a story, which is, a story partially about like relationship abuse. Like I have to think about how can we present that in a way where, the audience will receive it the way that we intend it, right? Because that, especially when we're dealing with very like sensitive subjects, it is important to be mindful of how you're portraying certain things and how you're discussing and playing out certain things, because while there may be understandings between people at the table, those understandings may not be explicit to the audience. And so you have to always think about like, okay, how can we make these things explicit to the audience in a way that we wouldn't really have to worry about if this was just a home game.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of the same thing of like, there's two things primarily that separate it. Is one, effort, the amount of effort I put into a home game versus an AP. For example, when I do home games, I literally just get a piece of paper. I, write the NPCs that are going to pop up and like maybe like very much of like a synopsis of what happens, and that's it. Versus when I do an AP, it is very much of like, this is who's in it. These are the threats. I usually separate my stuff of like, this is the threat. These are the NPCs that are in there. This is the information you're going to learn. This is the description of what this place looks like. It is very much more in depth about who's in it, what's going on, and what we're trying to get out of it. When I write, versus a home game, which is like, and they're going to fight, yada, 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 yada. And then I'm really a good improviser, so I'm able to just fly off my coattails and do that. But with AP, especially when you try to be more intentional, I want to make sure that I can still improv when I need to, but for the most part, I know everything that's primarily in here. So in case I have to make up more stuff, I have context to look back versus me just going, yeah, and he's the cousin to the second, whatever. Uh, the other thing, the other thing I think that separates it also as well, uh, it's just production, in terms of like getting, making things for it. For all these shows, for them, I do essentially mostly everything except tech because I just don't have the setup for tech. It is the one thing I am not good at. But I do all the overlays and whatnot, and even learning that takes time. Versus when you're a home game, I just pull up a soundtrack from my favorite video game ODST and just go. During the pandemic, I had to learn how to use a VTT because it's like my players still were very much of like, we need something physical to see. I was like, okay, and check it Piku, let's go. Here's some random tokens, check it Piku, and we're putting on the Witcher soundtrack. You're fighting now, boy. Is kind of how I would go to. So again, it's kind of that same of like effort and whatnot. And also it's a little bit more laissez-faire. You're with your friends. I mean, you're still with, people you're working with in AP, but there's just a little bit of like, you're concerned because time is a factor. That's the other thing. I try not to do 4 hours because nobody watches 4 hours. Even 3 hours, like I try my best to tighten it. I will say Doomsayers is probably the best I've ever been with time, but that's because Drac was like, I have to be out at this time. I'm like, got it. And then it was like 2 hours and 30 minutes. I was like, good stuff. But primarily with home games, you're with people, they went out of their way to get there, and you're usually people you kind of know. So it's usually just such a low bar of like, we just chill out and hang, we're just here to chill out and whatnot. Versus AP, where it's a little bit of like, people are taking time out of their, day and schedules, and you want to make sure you're respectful of that. But still, you got to make sure you have fun, because that's the end of the day. That's what we're here to do. We like telling stories, and that's what we're doing. We're just doing it for other people in a grander audience. So that's my stuff there. Yeah, Elden Ring and Detroit Become Human are god tier ODSTs. Ragnarok, God of War is also, the ambience tracks for those are wonderful.
Next question we're going to get into is about the decompressing, but a couple times art and music have been mentioned, and the art that you have is fantastic. So real quick, shout out your artist, because I see their name on the stream, but I don't remember how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's Finn. I don't know how to pronounce her. Let me see if I can pronounce their.
It's
I don't know.
Casal or something?
It's what I call Sol is Spanish, so it's probably some pronunciation of that. But they're a wonderful artist. I again, finding artists for a show, especially nowadays, is a bit hard because you get a lot of spam and AI. But when I saw Finn's work, I was immediately like, yes. It was very much of like, they have like, for this overlay, usually when I have overlays for show, there's usually a theme behind it. For the Mythic Initiative, it's very much neon. The Doomsayers, it was like 80s retro comics. For this time around, it was very much like paper, very like paper tears and all that, with a little bit of halftones. So with that, I saw Finn's work and it was fantastic. I think they did some Life is Strange work before, but also they did a lot of Red Dead art. So it was very much of like, they understood what cowboys look like. So it's like, that was pretty important. Well, because it's like, we have a cowboy setting. You need to know, in case if someone needs a hat or someone needs to look rough, that's the thing we need. So they did a wonderful job there.
I want everyone to say like their important character trademark or notes that they had for Finn, because mine was specifically, just give me the deepest scowl you got. And that was that. Lizzie having greasy hair and a scowl is like the most important part of, I think, Lizzie's design. And like Arizona and fucking Ava having also very, trademark traits about them that.
I remember when I sent over I was so inspired by you, Hamnah, actually. Your like notes and stuff on what you wanted your character art to be really inspired me to like kind of model my requests in the same way, even though we have very different characters. But I I think my number one thing was I loved the scar on the lips. That was really important to me. I wanted, Arizona to look like she had been in fights and had had a split lip. And I also really, really was inspired by traditional tattoo art as far as like her vibe goes. So I included a bunch of that in terms of like what I wanted on her body and also just like her general personality. And I think that, Finn did a phenomenal job bringing her to life.
Yeah, for Ava, I think my favorite character detail is that he has a nosebleed in the character art, which was for two reasons. One fun and one not fun. The fun reason is that Ava gets into a lot of fights too. Like I think all three of our PCs like canonically like get into fist fights just all the time. And so I
Charm
wanted
was
there
the
to
dump
be
stat this time
yeah.
around. Usually intelligence, it's charm. No one can talk their way out of anything.
So I wanted there to be like, similar to how Arizona has a split lip to represent the fact that they get into fights all the time. For me, it was like, okay, a nosebleed. And then the second is I wanted there to be since the physical abuse from Ava's boyfriend is a prominent part of the character, I wanted there to be also evidence of that as well. And so it's kind of this like Schrodinger's nosebleed of like, why is Ava's nose bleeding? And you don't really know. Also, it was important to me that he was smiling in the picture as well. To kind of like contrast with that. And then similar to Arizona, I had a whole second page to my art refs that didn't get used because we're doing busts and not like full bodies. But it's a whole page of just ideas of tattoos that are covering Ava's body. Because canonically, he is covered in miscellaneous tattoos, all in sort of like this sort of grungy punk style. And so that's also fun, even though it's not actually in the art really. It's like
You have
kind of
to
sort of
imagine
there.
the tattoo.
Yeah, you can imagine that he is covered
Imagine the
in
tattoo.
Love it. All right. So next, originally when I wrote this question for my just my template to start off for these showcases, it was just from emotional scenes or episodes. Your whole show is an emotional scene or episode dealing with loss and abuse, trauma. Oh, I'm eating it up because my therapist is going to love how many emotions I felt this week. That was a joke. So how do you prepare and how do you decompress? We've talked about the stars and wishes a little bit, but how do you get into that space and then get out of that space? Because it's deep and I love it. But
Yeah, I guess I'll describe the process, and then if you guys want to talk about your individual rituals, feel free. So, but primarily it's two parts of it. The first part again is with those beat sheets and pre-planning. They're in depth enough that like especially if something's going to happen, and even before that, I think content warnings is a big thing. Usually when I'm doing my session zeros, that's yes multiple, I do a 0 and 0.5 of letting. I usually, because I'm writing stuff out, I'm still understanding. But usually we have a very big understanding of like this is all the stuff that might show up, and then asking, "Are you okay with that?" And then when it comes episode time, uh, everybody kind of knows of like what's going on and what we're trying to hit on and what we're trying to do at that point. So we have an understanding of like the kind of emotions we're going into. So, for example, the funeral. Everybody was like, "Hey, this is a funeral, and it's probably going to be heavy," because emotions are going through, and everybody went into the understanding of this is a funeral. These are the vibes that are usually coming with it. So usually once we go through the episode, we do stars and wishes. For anybody who's unfamiliar with that, it is a safety tool. Usually you do at the end of a session, in which you usually everybody at the table gives everyone a star of like what did you like that they did most during the session, and then a wish of like what do you wish would happen next episode, or what's something that you really want to happen, which works wonders for two reasons. One, it gives everybody time to decompress because it's like usually 30 minutes to an hour. Usually those run for after the show's done. and it lets everybody, like, I like what you did, and I love the way we're going and whatnot. But wishes is also another thing, because if there's something you didn't like, or there's something that you wish you want to explore more, those wishes give you an opportunity to let me know as a GM and producer of like, hey, let's do this next episode, or I want to see this, or this is something I would like to explore if possible, which really adds to the environment. And overall, it's about creating an environment that is both collaborative and also open to ideas, because especially when leadership minor coming in here, but usually 10 leaders tend to feel like it's my way or the highway. It never really works. So I'm very much a person that is like giving direction, but also accepting direction, because it's the best way to lead people, is to create an environment they feel comfortable sharing ideas with you, and it ultimately helps the show in the end. So that's primarily what we kind of do overall, and I'll leave it to these guys here to describe their own process, because everybody has their own different things they do.
I could go because it looks like people are thinking. It's like I see people.
I gave you so much time.
thinking
Why?
caps on. I think for me, getting into a character is always like different depending on what character it is, and but without a doubt, one of the things that I do always is I like to make a character playlist that has like basically like the emotional internal world of that character. And sometimes what I'll do is, like, before an episode or before a session, I will just listen to that playlist and sort of like get myself into the emotional headspace of that character to understand, okay, like what is it that they are feeling? What is it that they want? What is like what drives them and that kind of thing. And that really helps me kind of like sit into the emotions of the character. And for me personally, I, whether by accident or on purpose, my characters tend to have pieces of like myself or my experiences in them, and so it's a little bit easier to kind of sit in that or to pull into that space, because I can just think about things that have happened to me, or like I can think about how I feel and things like that, and that normally helps kind of bridge that gap a little bit. um, and then in terms of like coming out of that space, I find personally, I'm somebody who doesn't experience a lot of bleed. Like it's not something I have a lot of experience with. I actually have a hard time like really getting into character the way that some people describe. I find that I'm always very acutely aware of myself and the character as like separate entities. So for me, I don't really have a very elaborate decompression ritual, because I don't find that I need to really like step out of the character very much, if that makes sense. It's more so just like a for me, I don't really like I don't become one with the character in that way where I might need to extricate myself from them. I'm always very acutely aware of like that's Ava and this is me kind of thing. So it kind of helps in that regard. And yeah, I will let the other two answer before I kind of get into an alternative thing.
This is I take notes for the show.
Just gonna make us all look bad.
You suck, you're bad. Yeah, no. So this is what I like to imagine Lizzie's actual composition notebook of like her like diary would be in like high school, when she actually loved stickers and like things that were more like multicolor and stuff like that. And then she became like immediately an adult, basically. Even throughout high school, I would say. She had very, very, another sort of characteristic about her is that she has very old parents. And what I do is I always like highlight things that I really like, or star things for Stars and Wishes or something. Yeah, like on this page in particular, you can't see it, but like I'm writing down stars that are specifically for everyone, as well as like starring moments that I liked for myself, because part of Stars and Wishes is also the sparkle, which is like your self star. Always forget everything that I've ever done, because when I'm in a scene, it's obviously hard to like take notes as you're doing the scene or performing. I'm like in a weird like mid space, I would say, as far as character bleed goes. Like I've lived in Lizzie's story for so long that I get emotional for the implications of her as a character, that then I kind of feel almost in like in this effective empathy sort of way. But yeah, we all made playlists for our characters, so like getting into playlists is always a great way to like get into the zone. A lot of Ways Blood and like I can't even remember, but yeah, it's just a lot of writing things down because the memory is not fantastic, and making sure that you write down stuff that you liked about your own performance too, for me at least.
That's a good answer. Well, I'm last, so I'll I suppose it's my turn. I think prepping for emotional scenes, it helps having the beat sheet, so I already have an idea of like what I'm going into, and also mentally knowing from the start the emotional road that I want my character to take. When I wrote Arizona out, I was very clear about where I wanted her to end up. Kind of like, Hamnah and Josephine were saying, you write down all these notes and you kind of prep for things and you have an idea of what you want and what you like. But also in the moment, allowing yourself, for me, I need to allow myself room for the natural unplannedness of emotions, if that makes sense. There are a lot of moments with Arizona in particular that I plan for her to do XYZ, or I know I want her to do XYZ, and we get to that moment and I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, I don't think she would actually. So being okay with switching things up and switching up how she reacts. Her reaction, her last conversation with her father is a moment like that, where I thought that it would be far more emotional and far more tear-jerky than it actually ended up being. And understanding that, just like real life, you never know how you're going to react in the moment. And sometimes those reactions don't necessarily make sense. But they also do, if that makes sense.
I will say I am not a note taker. I am like infamously not a note taker, because I can only do one thing at a time, like cognitively. So I can either listen, like even when I'm not in scene, it's like I can either listen and pay attention to what's happening, or I can take notes. Like I can't do both.
Yeah.
So that's Joe comes in clutch as our note taker.
I'm a jotter downer. I'm like a funny moments or a meme like jotter downer. I don't think I'm a note taker.
Yeah, I know highlights, and as well as everybody, I don't I have character bleed. I'm very much, my character is the clock. I'm like, okay, I gotta clock in at this time. I gotta get out at this time, and everything in between is a blur. Because it's just like, that's why I'm great that I write stuff down, because like this had to have happened at some point in between. But it's like I was so busy on this clock, and I don't remember who I was at that point. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm back. So I'm very much of like, I have very moments to show. I'm very Severance. Just like I go in and I come right back out.
I love that.
I think it's interesting too, like the topic about decompression, because for me, I find that like using safety tools in the moment, especially on a live stream where I know there's an audience watching, is like very difficult, because I'm the kind of person who like when something is happening, I'm like my brain just kind of goes whoop, and for me it like takes time for me to process that something has happened that I did not like or that I was uncomfortable with. Like I usually don't really know that in the moment, and I can't articulate it in the moment either. So for me, I love safety tools, but they're really hard to use in like when we're in scene. So for me, the decompression part is really important because it allows me time to process what happened and like how I feel and things like that. And then I can kind of come in and like be like, oh, hey, actually, like, can we talk about that thing that happened? And that like has happened like on Wildfire Club even. And actually, it was Joe that prompted the conversation to happen at all, where we were in decompression after, I think it was the first or second episode.
It was the first.
It was the
First,
first
yeah.
episode.
First.
And the particular scene, the kind of like implication that had come out during that episode was that Ava had gotten sexually assaulted in a bathroom. And we had sort of had a prior understanding beforehand that sexual assault was like not going to come up in the show. Like that's not Ava's experience. Like he's not being abused in that way specifically. It is just like it's physical abuse and it's emotional abuse, but it's not sexual. And so the kind of like misunderstanding that happened in that scene afterwards, we got to talk about it afterwards.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit during decomp, and then we talked about it over like the text Discord once I had a little bit more time to process as well. And in sort of that conversation, we were able to collectively kind of come to an understanding about like, yeah, that was a misunderstanding, that like was genuinely just an accident, and like we all agreed that like that wasn't what was supposed to happen, and like moving forward, like that is not going to happen, and we're actually going to retcon that scene entirely to remove that implication. And kind of like moving forward, we had put in kind of like additional things in place, like for example, talking about the beat sheet, we had sort of come to an agreement that like, you know, if there's anything that needs particular details to plan out to make sure that like surprises like that don't happen, or we're like on the same page about everything, that we can have those conversations beforehand so that, you know, the misunderstanding doesn't arise like during the scene, but happens or doesn't happen at all, ideally, kind of thing. And so for me, like that decomp is really important to help, because sometimes I can't say it in the moment, but like I'll be able to say it afterwards. They're like, oh, hey, actually, like, can we redo that or retcon that or change what happened actually?
Yeah, and it's important, especially it's like I misunderstood, but also like I rectified it. So it's a message for people who GM and produce out there. If an issue happens, don't neglect it or push it to the side. You have to address it. It has been literally the downfall of a lot of shows and channels and people where a thing is brought up and then they don't talk about it or they try to bury it and then it kills the project, which isn't a fun thing. But also, it's about safety first as well, and you need to acknowledge you mess up sometimes, and you need to fix the thing. You can't just have a broken sink and be like, "Oh well, I'm just gonna ignore it and it'll be all fine." That's how it works. So addressing the issue and acknowledging stuff happens is important.
I also just want to give huge roses to both Chris and Hamnah in particular, for your guys' role in that instance, bringing up what was wrong and also accepting that you made a mistake, and the professionalism that you both exhibited and the willingness to, you know, work together and understand that this mistake is separate from who someone is as a person. And you know, it was an unfortunate incident for sure, but it was not something that I feel like so often we see, like if someone does something, we assume worst intentions. And well, that is totally legitimate sometimes. Um, I enjoyed the conversation and seeing you guys be very frank with each other, and that comes from an established relationship, I know, but it was very refreshing to also witness as a coworker.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, like for me, I think a lot of my comfort in like being able to talk to Chris about it, like you said, like does come from like I've worked with Chris on many projects.
We did
at
a
this point,
one-on-one
so,
game.
like...
That's as intimate of a working relationship as it gets.
Yeah, so like I, you know, I knew like when it happened, I was like, okay, I know Chris didn't cross a line on purpose. Like I know that wasn't like intentional. I know that there's no like weird feelings, beliefs behind that kind of thing kind of coming in. Like I knew when it happened, I was like, okay, that happened. I'm sure it was a mistake. I'm sure it was just like a misunderstanding of some kind. And, you know, I think because like I've worked with Chris before and I've like seen the way that he operates, like I was able to be like, okay, benefit of the doubt, like let's just talk about what happened, and just sort of make sure that everything's clear so that we don't move forward with this happening again.
And I was glad you brought it up because it's like, it's in a sense of like feeling bad, but it's also in a sense of like, one of the main things is always like safety and making sure people are having fun at the table. And it's like you bringing it up was, I think, fantastic, and speaking vocally, because I know sometimes people are afraid to speak up because like if I
Oh, I
speak
was
up,
very afraid.
I know, but it's like it's the people get scared because it's like, oh, I'm gonna get cuffed off, or they're never gonna work with me again. It's like you need to bring it up because if God forbid the person does act in a negative way, that's someone you shouldn't be fucking working with, and it's a clear sign of like, okay, this is a sign that I should never come back. But when you bring it up and somebody reacts to it, because I don't know what's going on through people's heads, and it's also like I didn't have the same understanding because I like abuse. I was like, oh, it's that, but it's like it can be a very multifaceted thing that you need to understand. So bringing up and speaking about it was a great thing because I would have never caught it with on my own. So it's again why you listen to people that you bring onto your show, because people's feelings are valid, and you need to, especially when you're in a leadership or GMing, whatever, you need to listen to people because if they're bringing it up, it clearly bothered them, and you need to talk it out.
Now the Band-Aid's been ripped off too, so if something ever happens in the future, we know that we can talk about it.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna say one of the things that I like very strongly believe in is that conflict is both inevitable and also a opportunity. If we're in relation with each other, at some point we're gonna get into a conflict, right? We're gonna disagree about something. Somebody's gonna annoy someone else. Somebody's gonna accidentally hurt someone else, and that's just gonna happen. And so I think conflict happening isn't the issue. It's really about like what happens. How do we deal with it? And for me, I really look at conflict like an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to demonstrate to people that you care about them, right? Like I like for example, this happening, like I felt very cared for by Chris in this whole process, and by like you, Cam, and you, Josephine, as well, right? Like I felt very held and very it was scary for me, and I was vulnerable, and I was like, I was feeling a lot of things, and for me that was an opportunity um to allow for that care to happen. And like you said, like now the band-aid's ripped off, and like if it happens again, I'll be less scared, to come to everybody and be like, I'm feeling a kind of way actually, right? And that trust is built because of how we were able to handle it when it happened.
And I want to commend you all from the viewer side, that as Chris said, you didn't hide it. When you go on YouTube, and since it's the first episode, the warning is literally the first thing you see. Like, this happened. We have, all the warning screen. I can't quote it, but it is like, these are the important things, and you put in the content warning, and then in episode 2 you say it right at the beginning, and it's like, I probably would not have thought, because of where I come from as a person, that scene I would have skipped past it and not given it too much thought. And that is where I am like seeing this warning, and I'm like, oh, this is this has an effect, and it brings more closeness to you all as we are like learning, how you take care of each other. And I really commend that. For continuity's sake, while you all were talking, one of the balls of my piercing fell out, and so now one of my piercings just fell out. And so that's why I looked weird, and I apologize.
Girl,
because you all.
What do you think? I never wear a septum anymore. That shit, I lose them all the time.
Look, I have a ring, like a clicker ring, so that can't fall out.
Life finds a way.
Really? How?
Maybe I have like a bad nose.
No. I think it's the jewelry. I think we can blame the jewelry.
Yeah. It also could be like I wear jewelry too small for me or something. Like But anyway, sorry.
I wanted to apologize for that, as I was doing weird things while you were having this great conversation.
Totally fine.
But I want to thank you all for sharing that and talking about it, because it's very important. Y'all speak up at your tables. Like, it doesn't matter. And if you can't, that is also a conversation.
Yeah,
It's
as I said,
very
a lot
important.
of shows and channels have died because people
Yes.
speak up, or when they did speak up, the people they reacted away. It's like, okay, you shouldn't be making shows if this is how you feel about this occasion. I've seen it happen. I feel very much like Dr. Manhattan. It's like it's 1999 and someone has done this again. It is 2000 and whatever. Somebody's done this again.
Yes.
And it sadly is still happening to this day. But it's like, speak up. If it gets fixed, then that's how you create a working relationship. If it doesn't get fixed and the person wants to avoid it, then don't work with that person because they're not going to last very long. So it shows a lot about who you work with, depending on how they respond to those situations.
All right. And I know we're nearing the time that we had originally scheduled to end. I want to get these 2 chat questions in real quick because Moxberry gave 2 very good questions in chat. We appreciate you. You've been very active today.
Really good questions.
All right. The first one is for Chris, but, well, Moxberry has says it's for Chris, but I think it also can talk about the player characters as well. So, when writing historical settings, even as recent as the 80s, how do you go about depicting varied gender identities and sexual orientations in times where these identities were largely rejected and repressed? Can you balance these truths, or is it more important to allow queerness to be unimpeded in these imagined Earths? I ask because I noticed the prevalence, but not exactly a focus on their queer identities in Wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it depends on the scenario. So, for example, making Mythic Initiative, there isn't a lot of like rejection or sort of like in terms of forces actively fighting against that. Because one, they're all powerful monsters. So if anybody were to say something, they most likely be evaporated in an instant, which is very valid. You laugh, Eden would fucking shotgun somebody to death. They even mentioned. And then in terms of there's other ways to explore that rather than somebody being in your face saying you shouldn't exist. In terms of identity for Wildfire, it's almost a little bit light in a sense. It isn't necessarily, there are not in at the moment active forces except for your kind of like maybe in the church faction or sort of the church figures that still have that sort of mindset when it comes to relationship, not necessarily the idea of it, but in terms of like infidelity and all that stuff. But primarily when I am doing this, it isn't too big of a pushback on it, unless if it's important to the story. If it is something that somebody wants to like actively explore, like for Lizzie's character, how it's more repressed because they don't understand who they are as a person, especially with their lifestyle, then that's kind of where I kind of build on top of that or kind of focus on it. But if it isn't a part of that, then that's something I don't do. For example, when I was making this setting, I didn't have a church at all because I understood how that comes into play with queerness.
What would Jesus do, baby?
Oh my God, Joe.
Like somebody at the library came straight and said, "Hello, I'm here for this," and I was like, "That's a church." I thought we weren't gonna touch on that, but here we are. And then I was like, okay, it's about, I think at the end of the day, navigating it responsibly. I'm Ace, so I'm someone who is still part of that. Ace in Spanish or Latine, which is, I've had my own fair share of experiences on both ends. So I understand how it can affect people. So usually if it is for story's sake, or there's a character that really wants to explore that sort of pushback or sort of like going over that hill and exploring that, then for sure. But if not, it's not something primarily I touch on unless if it's part of the active theme. Again, I feel like Wildfire is one of those rare instances because it's a small town, especially in Midwest, and that tends to have a lot of the communities. So I feel Wildfire is one of the few exceptions, but for other shows and whatnot, it's not as big of a thing unless somebody actively wants to explore that.
So I have a whole thing I'd love to talk about.
Get in there, Catholic.
Okay.
Go for it.
So
as soon as you clapped your hands, I was like, all right, let's go.
Bro, I'm similarly like, dude, fucking knock it out of the park, Joe.
So in the American 80s at the moment, obviously we are experiencing the HIV/AIDS epidemic as well as moral clauses and the moral panic. We're like getting right, not off of the heels, but like in this new quote unquote modern or developed McCarthyism, Cold War stuff, where it's starting to translate to not only like the concept of like socialism, but also just like homosexuals and trans people and that sort of stuff. My roommate is screaming in the other room, so if you hear that, it's everything is okay. But like it's I was actually reading there's a Joseon Dynasty supplement of Good Society that's out right now by Miss Mick. And there's a really interesting breakdown of like how historically accurate you want to go, semi-historically accurate, and like just straight up imagination fantasy that your story might want to take place in, depending on table safety and things like that. And I would, we don't specifically talk about what the like greater world at large is experiencing, because we're like these three psychics going through this small town shenanigans where certain subjects, such as like maybe someone's family member is going through or is affected by HIV/AIDS, or is currently in jail for being openly gay or something, or trans at the moment. And like what I think the Wildfire Club does is, obviously like we're all in like the technical categorization of like us three being monsters or like monstrous people or like kind of superhero-y or something like that. But I do think, interestingly, we take a more semi-historical take on it, especially because like Ava being a he/him genderqueer person, someone that uses he/him pronouns and is a genderqueer person, like that is entirely within the realm of the 80s. Like we absolutely, there is historic evidence of people existing. And then like Lizzie and Arizona are both just, cowboy dykes. So that absolutely we've had for so many years, but the language is interesting. Like the terminology and stuff like that is interesting, because I think a lot of the American attitude about being openly queer or gay or whatever is sort of not just following in line of like what works as like a binary, like a lot of trans men being introduced through like the lesbian communities and things like that. That is certainly its own complicated sort of queer identity and history. But like a lot of the historical cross-dressing that we see is because that just worked for the binary language that we have, but that we still have, and very clearly had before. Like a man or a woman cross-dressing as a man getting married to a woman is something that worked historically. So the more that you were able to just sort of skirt through and skate like hidden in between the lines, is like, I think we hit a very interesting amount of that without really saying too much in Wildfire Club. So I think it is, to cap, we're doing an interesting semi-historical take on a small town experiencing something as metaphorical and wild as developing psychic powers due to a like travesty, while also we'll be getting into Chris's like the built-in history of the town as well. Like there's so many interesting things as far as like
Oregon Trail and like that whole thing behind it,
riots and protests and things like that you kind of like you took some experience, like actual history from like American world, and then how that shapes our backgrounds is so like fascinating. Basically, like American history is so fraught with, obviously, disgusting bigotry and moral panics about being gay or trans or literally anything. But yeah, it's really cool and interesting to live in these identities, and obviously, not experience Chris calling us homophobic slurs or whatever, for the realism, like for historical accuracy, and just kind of live in it more so as like, these are the ways that our characters are interacted with in ways where we're able to just sort of without saying it, hide between the lines a lot of the times, which does feel, again, that it gives that semi-historical edge to it all, which is really cool.
Yeah, I would
I
just
love the way you put that. I
Yeah.
love the way you put the hide between the lines too.
Yeah.
I was gonna
semi-realistic
say-
is like, I would say Weird Earth is primarily when it comes to anything with it, because it's like history but with some state of it changed or weird and whatnot. So.
Yeah, and I also think one of the things that when I was designing Arizona and when we were all discussing our characters, one of the things that came to me a lot was just the nature of queer community at all is often a hidden one. Queer kids tend to find each other. Like, they just naturally gravitate to each other, even before we have the language for what we are, even before we know what we are. We tend to gravitate towards each other. And I think that's always been true. And to me, I find it quite refreshing that we are telling a story that is very, very queer in nature and stars queer characters, without just resorting to throwing insults at our characters and throwing homophobia at us, even though that would make a lot of sense in a small town in a lot of ways. But also, people who are queer have always been here, and just because their communities and their stories have tended to be more private or in the shadows because of safety reasons does not mean that they weren't. And I think the story of, Lizzie in particular, but also like Arizona and Ava, all of us, just because our characters aren't being hate crime doesn't mean that any less queer, if that makes sense. And I think that, yeah, queer people tend to find each other. They find communities wherever that is, whether that's a small town in Colorado or that's, freaking Sheridan Square in New York. Like, we find each other. So
I think it's also a balance between like what is going on, like what is coloring the backdrop of your story versus what is the focus of your story, right? Because just because queer characters exist doesn't mean that their queerness is the centerpiece of their narrative arc, right? Like for Lizzie, for example, that is a major part of her character. But for Ava, for example, I would say him being genderqueer really isn't the point of his character. That's just a fact about him, but it's not really like what I'm focusing on. And I think that like either choice is good and valid in a story, right? And so we also have to remember that like we're telling a story at the end of the day and we're choosing to focus on specific things, but that doesn't change that there is a backdrop of stuff. Like Josephine said, like, there is a backdrop to this story of like, yeah, the HIV AIDS pandemic is happening right now. Is Wildfire Club about that? No, but it is happening. And, that's something that we think about. And another sort of thing that I think about that we did explicitly talk about behind the scenes, like in session 0, is even the setting of like a Western cowboy town, right? Like that is rife with so much history when it comes to colonialism, right? And when it comes to indigeneity. Like Arizona's family, for example, is like treated as like the founders of this town. They've been here for generations. They are the quote unquote rightful owners of this land. Except they're not really, if we think about it, because Arizona's family is white, right? And they come from a line of like colonialism and colonizers. The true people who live, like who own this land or steward it, are like the indigenous folks that Chris, for example, like has written into the world that exist, but they are not the focus of this story per se. But that does influence how we play our characters and how the story plays out. It's just not what we're going to center necessarily for everything that's happening. And I think that's true of pretty much every story, right? Like there's always a backdrop of stuff that's happening, and then there's always the thing you choose to focus on. And it's about balancing, like, how does the backdrop stuff affect the thing that you're focusing on? How does that color the way that you tell that story?
I think it definitely informs how we play our characters, but not necessarily, dictates. Like you mentioned the colonizer background of Arizona. When we discussed that and you guys brought up like, hey, Arizona being a Holloway, being one of the quote unquote founders would mean a background of colonization. Like how comfortable are you with playing that? me, you know, as a player, it changed how I played Arizona. It gave her a bit more of a, you know, yes, I feel so entitled to, like, I'm proud of my heritage. And also now that's a story that I am exploring with her of, okay, but also how much privilege am I given for something that I really shouldn't be, you know, and how much respect am I given for something that I really shouldn't be? And also, how much does my whiteness and my queerness and the fact, how much does my whiteness and the fact that I am from a colonizer family in Arizona protect her queerness too? Because Arizona is very openly queer. So, fun times.
I love all of that. I was thinking about how it's, you know, not the focus, but there are things throughout that also have to do with just the writing, that make it a more comfortable queer story. I don't know if it, Chris, was intended or if anyone really noticed, but and spoiler, when Amber Woods comes into the what happened to Amber Woods, 90% of the time you use gender neutral pronouns with Amber. And it wasn't until we got to learn through NPCs more about them that pronouns were assigned. And it's little things like that that that's good representation. Like, I just loved, I was catching that even though it wasn't a focus. Nobody talked about it. I was catching that happened. And I'm very interested to hear more, to experience more of Arizona's story about being a colonizer, because there's also a line that, see, now I'm getting too into nitpicking every single line and thing, and we could go for 4 hours with all of the things that I wanted to get to, and we're not getting to it. The sheriff. There is a sort of, not really offhand, but offhand comment about the sheriff being from the people who were forced to move. And I don't, and I think that was just an implied, and it kind of really hit me. And I hope I'm not misquoting it or misinterpreting it, but I just like sprinkling things like that in just really helped build the, I don't know. I want it. That's great. And I loved it. All right. Here we go. Moxberry's next question is for the players. And I guess really quick, we have talked vaguely about the psychic powers and the and your wildfire, but the point, the powers that you're learning, you call your wildfire. And so I'm just tying those two together for this question. In the last episode, they learned a lot more about their wildfire powers and more accurately defined them. I was wondering which came first, their powers or their personality, and how the two influenced each other, since this is an official hack of kids on bikes because of these abilities.
I think Josephine should take this one first because I know you have a good
Oh,
answer.
really?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know
I
you
do.
have a good answer.
You're so careful with it. It's just like the crazy thing about it.
Your
Yeah,
character
so-
design is unmatched.
Yeah. I think we all started with personality over power. And I mean, everyone will speak for themselves, but Lizzie, it came very easy to me. Again, she's a character that has existed for a very long time. She's so earth-based, and there's this series of psychic powers that are just based in like kinesis, right? And there's a lot of like elemental mimicry and elemental kinesis and things like that. But because I was also interested in her being a firefighter, specifically like a volunteer firefighter, someone that you know, not only that, like she's like works as a bartender, she fixes people's sinks for free, gets people down to like, you know, abortion clinics or, you know, food banks and things like that. She's just like everyone's aunt and babysitter, basically. And there's like a carefulness to this type of person. She not only has taken care of very old parents for a long time, but she got married to the pastor's son at 19. And so, yeah, and not only is, her husband the pastor's son, but her parents are very well known and loved people who worked in the mines. They immigrated specifically to Harts Valley to take part in the mining migration. There was a call for this Coloradan mining company that specifically set place in Harts Valley, and that's how, you know, Lizzie came to be born into America or whatever. And yeah, there's a carefulness, there's an incredible amount of self-preservation that comes with Lizzie, but at the same time, because of her role in the town, like her ability to care for people, that also translated to her not taking any shit and getting into a lot of fights specifically for self-defense or to protect someone else. But her Kids on Bikes flaw is that she's hot-tempered. There is this fire aspect to Lizzie. So with her pyrokinesis, her being a firefighter, her having a very careful background, and at any point someone could say something about or to her husband or to her family or to her father-in-law or something. And if she were not so established, maybe she wouldn't even be getting into fights. But another part of her is that she can't lie very well. She's a big scowl on her face. Everyone can tell if Lizzie is not into something that's happening. Her grit is the lowest, and you kind of need a good grit score to withstand your wildfire. So all of it metaphorically cannibalized into itself to essentially just be like the perfect story for her is that her psychic power is pyrokinesis, because she needs to channel passion for the first time and allow herself to be touched by other people, to be loved by other people, for her to love herself. All of that, anything metaphorically that stands for fire is the exact reason that pyrokinesis had to be Lizzie's psychic power.
Yeah, I remember you were the first person to pick your power. You had it on lock very
fire.
quickly.
just fire. Yeah.
Fire, no.
I love
to
to
lesbian fire.
the way I remember reading yours, and I thought of the juxtaposition between having such a character that is so caring for everyone around you to having such a power that is so capable of destruction.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also the Prometheusness, the reason we are human and able to take care of each other.
Yeah, literally.
You use fire to cook. Fire is life-bringing,
Yeah, fire is life, exactly. But also, you have a lot of power there.
Cam, you were second to choose.
Was I? Oh
yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was last. I was having trouble for a hot minute.
I'll go next. I remember I had a couple of ideas. I was kind of stumped on the power. I also went with personality first. And I kind of offhandedly made Arizona's last name Holloway to reference the founders, because I thought, it'll be a nice tie-in to her being a townie, her being here forever. And as I was thinking of powers, it was Chris who suggested her power manifests in the way that it does, which is very Last Night in Soho, which is one of my favorite films and one of Chris's favorite films.
Best movie ever.
Yeah, phenomenal movie with Anya Taylor-Joy if you have not seen it. But essentially she has the ability to connect with ghosts, with dead people, in particular, relatives. And there's a lot more that you haven't seen that she's capable of that will happen. But I loved the idea of her being so tied to a family that is actually quite distant from her, because her father was quite absent from her childhood, and she kind of idealized him because, well, the parent that's not there, naturally must be better than the parent that's there that sucks, which is a common feeling that a lot of kids have. But yeah, her power came a lot from like ties to the community, ties to bonds with family, bonds with those who came before, and this feeling of obligation.
There's
I
a
love
lot of
that.
obligation in small town communities. That is
Yep.
spot on. Keep going. Sorry.
You gotta love a townie.
Like we said earlier, I was the last to pick my powers. I was having a lot of trouble for a while because I wasn't really sure what I wanted Alpha's power to be. Like Joe mentioned, I also picked my personality. I developed the character's personality and like who he was first before thinking about the power. And I was thinking about it, and one thing I really, really wanted to tie into was Ava's role as a musician. Ava is a bass guitar player, a bassist for a band, Oral Riot. I was like, that's a really big part of this character. It's not really a focus like of the story or anything. We're not necessarily really concerned with him um, being a musician per se, but it is important. It is an integral part of who he is. And so I really wanted to tie that in, especially because, like Ava also works at the record store. That's like his job. That's his day job. And so I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, like what is the power of music, so to speak? I was like, what does music do for us? And one of the things that I really sort of got stuck on was that music has the ability to change how we feel. Right. Music has the ability to really, amp us up. People have gym playlists, to help them feel ready to lift weights and do exercise. And, people listen to music when they're sad to, commiserate with that kind of feeling so that they don't feel so alone. And, people make playlists for each other. We made playlists for our characters. Like, like music has the ability to change how we feel and to tell a story. And so, I was like, okay, I want that specifically. And so I thought about it a little bit, and what I landed on was that Ava's power is specifically that he can change the how your autonomic nervous system works. Basically, he can amp you up or he can bring you way down. Now, a fun psychological fact is that the experience of your autonomic nervous system like working doesn't actually dictate the valence of that emotion. So that means that just because you're amped up doesn't actually tell you anything about what you're going to feel. In the same situation, depending on the circumstances, that same physiological response that you have of being amped up, you can either interpret as fear, as anxiety, as anger, as happiness, as elation, euphoria, the same physiological response, but very different ways of interpreting that emotion. And so, specifically, Ava doesn't control people's emotions. He just changes the sort of intensity of that feeling, that physiological response. So, it's either like boosting your adrenaline, boosting that sort of feeling, or bringing it way down. And then how you interpret that is totally up to you, right? It's totally up to your circumstances, what's happening around you. You can interpret that as good or as bad, and it's not in Ava's control, actually. And I think that's very much how music functions, right? We can have an intention when we make art, when we make music, and when we listen to it, we can have an intention with what we want people to feel, but really we can't control how people are going to interpret it per se. And so I think there's a beautiful connection between intention and the unknowability of like people's own lenses and experiences that they're going to bring to a situation. And I wanted to have that kind of combination for Ava. I wanted him to have control, but a limited amount of it. He's not totally in control of another person's emotions. And I think that sort of interplay is very fun for me.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I was gonna say real quick. That's kind of the reason why I like the system and the hack, because you don't usually get these games where you just play kids on bikes. Usually, you're just people. But with these powers, I think it adds another element within the investigation in which these things can help or not help you ultimately trying to achieve your goal. Because this wildfire, especially the way the game is developed or the hack, is that the more powerful you get, there are more negative sides that happens. And even if you succeed in sometimes, you can explode, and it may be too much for you to handle, which leads you to its own things, which I think is all wonderful. And then again, spoilers in case anybody sees, is that they're not the only ones in town that have this power, which is a whole nother thing of like there's still other power PCs within this that have their own set of rules and things that can affect these guys or help them and hurt them. So overall, that's kind of one of the things I like about the hack as well. If it adds an extra weird dimension to the investigation of whatever you're usually doing in your small town.
I real quick wanted to piggyback off what Hamnah said about music, because I know I learned about the autonomic system from a song about it from Candy Carpenter called Nervous System. 10 out of 10 recommend. Literally talks about that. But the like catches. I am a nervous system. I'm nervous all the time. It's beautiful. But the second half of my question, because I'm going to keep it brief, Chris already talked about a little bit, is in the 4th episode we meet an NPC that has a wildfire, and I believe it is sort of a premonition, or a historical premonition. It's beautiful. So my question is, when this hack comes out, is it a list of predetermined powers, or is it like a system where you can create your power within some guidelines?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Hello. Sorry, we also got a raid. Hi, people in the raid.
Hello, wonderful people. The way I wrote the book, it's very much you can choose whatever your power can be, which I know, again, some of these folks like Hamnah had a difficult time because it's just like there's so many things you can be, but I think it's a wonderful thing of the choice of what your power can be, because usually when you have a certain set of like these are the things you can choose from, it limits the amount of imagination that people can get when it comes to choosing their power, because they'll be more focused on like mechanically which one would be best rather than what fits with their character. As you all heard from these guys here, when I was doing the session 0, it first was who is your character, and then it was what power do they have, because as you can see, each of these guys' powers here correlate to who they are as a person. And even then, when they're using the power, maybe their personality changes and that power changes. So the wildfire is more of like, it's not too spoiler here, it's more like an adaptive entity in a sense. It's something that when it latches onto a person, it almost like self-analyzes who they are and then reflects what power would come off of that person. So in the official hack, it's that same sort of way of like, there are basically just the rule set of how a wildfire power works, but it can be whatever you want that to be, whether it be levitating somebody off the ground, reading somebody's mind, or anything you can really think of. It's really up to you and your GM's discretion, because nothing's too overpowered. I mean, for Christ's sakes, we got somebody that can speak to the dead. That would be kind of hurtful in an investigation of like, why don't you just dig up the corpse and just, ask, hey man, who killed you? You can see that the power doesn't necessarily work that way. And also, when you're starting off with your power, you start at a D4. So you generally suck at using your power. So you can't be off the gate unless you get really, really lucky, which sometimes they get lucky. But for the general most part, you have to build up your wildfire. And even then, when you're building it up, if you go, like, when you get a 20 on a D20, you have to lash out, which is this thing of, like, you have to almost release like a valve, like you're overflowing, you have to release all this power, and ultimately something will be changed, or people will view you differently after the fact. So it very much is a give and take system, and it's essentially kind of like its own separate stat that explodes slightly differently than the others, which I really like, and so far it's been working out great. Last episode, these guys really got into their wildfire die, and it was getting weird, which is wonderful. And they were able to learn things and whatnot. So it really is what you can think of.
Arizona was getting buried while looking into the past. It was wild.
It was a good time.
Good times.
All right. So we, as I said, could go on for hours and hours because we didn't even get to touch on some of the things like um, monogamous wood and polyamorous wood, which was one of the funniest moments. And some quotes that I wrote down. Arizona saying, "You've got a lot of fucking nerve," and Randall going, "Can you be more specific? Because it's only Tuesday and haven't done all my nerve for the week." Um, it's not all sad. There are
With
hilarious
a
moments
gun.
like this.
We're funny guys, I promise.
Or Arizona.
It's mostly
saying,
Arizona, I think.
It is. I realized how many, and I feel bad, how many of these are actually Arizona quotes. Carcina, ain't nobody getting sick in cars. There's just so many little moments.
I forgot about that one.
It's just like we could talk about this for hours, but we need to wrap it up because we have gone a little bit over, and I want to make sure that we hit our heart out. So the last question is actually going to be our outro because you all do more than just this. And so we're going to go around and I want to hear like what is coming in the future for not just Wildfire Club, but Taino Tales and your personal projects for everybody. Also where they can find you. If you're watching this after the fact, links to everything they talk about or link trees and such are going to be in the description below. I'm going to see if the bot's working this week to put them in chat right now. But let us go in the opposite direction from the intro, so I'm throwing it off a little bit. So Cam, where can we find you? What are you working on? What future projects do you have? Gush about yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cam. You can find me at cam.inator just about everywhere. This is Winston, my cat. He's getting cuddly and then he's not getting cuddly at the same time. Some things I have coming up are I am currently shooting my first film, which is exciting. That is completely directed, written, and produced by me, which is super cool. So that should be available for public release at probably end of June. But it's a short film. It's lovely. It's based off of Dante and Beatrice. Very cute, kind of art housey. I hope you all don't mind. I also am in a new musical. It's a new work called Misconnections that you can see at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I'm flying out to Edinburgh to perform it. Thank everybody who has supported me for that, which is cool. Yeah, most of my shit is not online is the problem. But yeah, so that's very cool. And then I have a few other film projects and some theater stuff coming up in the next few months, which is awesome. And as far as online stuff goes, dude, fucking you can catch all of us in the Wildfire Club every Sunday. How exciting is that? And how cool is that? And it'll only get better from here. I'm excited for us to explore, Ava's and Lizzie's powers and their backgrounds and their fun, cool things. Yeah, that's where I'm at. So I'll kick it. I don't remember who was right before me. I think it was Chris, or no, it was Joe.
Josephine.
It's me.
It was Josephine. Yes.
I've been Josephine. You can find me on socials at Scary Dog Friend. Other than Wildfire Club, I also co-produce Bad House RPG with my friend Fabian Lelay or Rockets and Pens. We do a lot of World of Darkness stuff. Vampire the Masquerade, Hunter the Reckoning. We just wrapped Midnight Rush, which was our big Hunter the Reckoning project. And we are kicking off a bunch of series of vampire and otherwise in the summer. So we're taking a little rest before then. I'm also over on the Mandy's channel on Fridays where we have a pre-recorded Curse of Strahd game where instead Strahd is indeed the Baroness, is Lady Strahd. And we are all an entirely sapphic cast of players and also using Pathfinder 2e for some horror stuff. I will always be in a horror game. If you want to talk about getting certain horror projects up, let's talk. But yeah, Bad House RPG, Scary Dog Friend. I'll pass it over to Hamnah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hamnah. I use any and all pronouns, and I am a TTRPG performer and producer. You can find me all over the social medias at Lilith TTRPG. That is Lilith TTRPG. I am most active on Blue Sky, so if you want to follow me and what I'm up to, Blue Sky is probably the place to go. I'm also the executive director of Tender Vicious Studios, which is a multimedia production studio that creates experimental art with intent. Right now, the first project that is officially coming out of the studio is a tabletop actual play podcast called Laurie's House, which Chris briefly mentioned earlier. Laurie's House is
Lizzie's house.
Yeah, Lizzie, right next to Lizzie's. Go to Lizzie's house and then keep going. And then you'll find Laurie's house. The show is about imperfect memory, identity, and community. It is an absolutely beautiful, I'm biased, but it is an absolutely beautiful podcast. We are playing a system called The Home We Remember, which is a tabletop role-playing game system that I wrote alongside the other people that are on Laurie's House, and we made it actually very heavily inspired by Life is Strange, amongst other things. And the ash can for the game will be coming out hopefully later this month, if not by June at the very latest. And so you can check that out. But if you want to hear the game played, check out Laurie's House. And I promise that you will not be disappointed. We only have 3 episodes out right now. Very easy to catch up. And with that, I will pass things over to Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris, and I have not been your GM for these preceding evenings. My brain immediately was like, lock in, son.
I saw it coming.
Yeah, it was like, what? You can find me mostly on Blue Sky. I'm really more on Blue Sky than anything at VO Colón. That's CLLON. And of course, Taino Tales is also on Blue Sky as well. With the @ is already in the chat there, so you can go follow it over there. In terms of what I got going on, of course, the Wildfire Club. I was really, really sick for about a month. Part of my lung collapsed, but I'm feeling better now. Yeah, it was a time. I got something kicked the living daylights out of me, but it can't put a good man down, so I'm still up. But you can catch us on Sundays. We are approaching episode 5, so we're about halfway through. If you're trying to catch up, we have the YouTube there if you want to catch up the episodes. But next Sunday, we'll have another episode for you there. In terms of what we got going on in the future, if you did not see it, we are also going to be part of this year's Cobalt Creates program for 2025. And we're going to be making a lovely little show called Ascension. Not too many details yet because we're still working on it, but essentially it's for those any of those folks out there like Bioshock Infinite. This one's about for you. It's about 2 people trying to escape a city, so it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. And we are currently re-uploading because I really pushed it off for the longest time because there was a lot of episodes, but we're re-uploading the entirety of the Mythic Initiative. So season 1 is up and season 2 is in its process of being re-uploaded. So we're doing it by a weekly basis as we're building up to Tiamat 3, which we are working on. So we got 2 lovely shows. One's for your urban fantasy kids and time travel, and the other one's for your high fantasy kiddos there. So we're working on a lot of stuff, and we're very excited for everything that's coming out there. So follow us there for all the updates, and you get to see why I'm called Trauma Man Affectionate.
Trauma Man non-derogatory.
Trauma Man non-derogatory.
Not affectionate.
Not affectionate.
I want to thank you once again for coming here and talking with me about your show and about yourselves, and it has been absolutely amazing. I will round this out. I have been Nekola, your host, Nekola the Druid, on all the social places, but mostly as the Director of Programming for Diversity Saves. If you have a project or a game or a show or something that you are working on that you would like featured on the showcase, be sure to visit diversitysaves.org for our community showcase application page. Also coming up at the end of May, we have our spring fundraiser, which is in collaboration with the Heart is a Dungeon podcast. Rara and their team over there have fully set up 3 amazing games that are a little chaotic but a little cozy as part of our spring fundraiser for our grant program. But that is all, and I think it is time that we all head out and go to bed. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a great night. I forgot to set up going to the ending screen. There we go. Okay. Good night.